Hey there, everyone. Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all who all are joining us globally. I am Parthuru, Events and Program Manager for Microsoft Reactor India. And yes, I welcome you all to yet another episode of MVP Connect. Before we start our today's event, let's go through our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, participate together. So please be respectful of other people's views, understand their differences, be kind and considerate in a way you all engage. We do encourage you all to participate. Please drop all your questions in the chat section. Now, I'd like to bring in speaker for our today's event, our MVP Samik Roy.
Hi,
Hi Samik, how are you?
I'm good, good. Thank you for inviting and having me here.
Long time we meeting, Samik.
Yeah, long
I
time.
remember we last met at Global Azure Day.
Yes, yes. I think after that we did one webinar like this, but yeah, mostly Global Azure is
In
the major.
person, we connected once for Global Azure Day.
Exactly.
Yep. Yes, Samik, the floor is all yours. The topic looks exciting.
Cute. All right. So before I begin, I would like to thank Parth and the entire Reactor team to put this together,
Welcome.
and also a great warm welcome to all of you to take out your time for learning with me and then understanding building your own plugin for Copilot for security, right? So myself, a little bit about I'm a Microsoft MVP on the security area and an MCT as well. I do contribute to Microsoft Sentinel and other security products, and also uh, keep talks to help people understand Microsoft security landscape. So with that said, and you can see my LinkedIn profile as a scanner if you want to connect to. Now, today's topic, we are going to talk about building your own plugin for Copilot for security. Now, having said that, Copilot for security, you might already know that Copilot for security is the youngest Copilot in the Copilot bunch, because it basically is the newest one, and Microsoft is still evolving, and it is really building up things with the contribution from Microsoft and all the community as well. And having said that, I would also like to highlight one unique identifier for Copilot for security is, mostly if you look at most of the Copilot, they work on licensing basis. That means if you have, or the organizations you're working with or working for have the licenses assigned to a user, you're going to use that, or you can use that. But with Security Copilot or Copilot for security, right? The good part is, if you have an Azure subscription, you can straight away spin it up. It doesn't need any additional licensing, right? So because I am spin it up on the Azure subscription, and you can connect it to your environment. And here I have done with my Microsoft Sentinel instance. So, and before we go further, another point is, if you are trying to have security Copilot, right, and as you know, by definition, right, Copilot cannot work on its own. So fundamentally, you have to have some sort of background or some sort of pre-setup done. For example, set up Microsoft Sentinel Defender, and they have some data ingested so that the security Copilot can give you better results, right? And a lot of organizations are adopting Copilot for security because they already have a complex security infrastructure, and they're already utilizing Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft Defender to protect their entire environment, and alongside Microsoft XDR suite itself, right? So in that context, yes, as you know, security is unique by itself because it cannot be templated around all organization. Yes, there are products which you can buy or you can deploy for your organization, but you have to make it tailored particularly for your organization to make it work better or make it work seamlessly, right? And in the session today, what you're going to learn is, yes, let's say you have Sentinel or Defender installed, you have, or you have configured, you have Copilot installed or Copilot running. Now, if you want to build something custom, if you want to build something plugin as your own, and when you say plugin, right, obviously by the definition it says it is something you add on, right? You plug and play, and we're going to see what are the different ways you can build plugins, and why you should build plugin in the first place, right? So with that said, let me try to jump onto the first agenda slide. And as I say, I intend to spend most of the time during the session today within Azure portal and Copilot screen so that I can show you exactly how things work and how the tool looks like, right? And eventually take it from there. So the agenda has is very, very crisp. It is a we start with the why we need a custom plugin, or and how we're going to do that, and mostly that how part will be also wrapped around with a demo live in Azure portal, right? And obviously though the Q&A is end, so obviously feel free to have in the chat, and then we can have the questions or any specific scenarios you are trying to build, address at the end of the session. With that said, I would like to go to the next slide on the why piece of it, and let's try to understand like why we need that. Obviously when you talk about security, right, so there are multiple aspects to cover in security. Assuming that you already have a good security posture, or maybe security landscape that's decided or defined, you still need it to integrate with other services. For example, if you have a ticketing system or IDSM system, right, which you want to integrate out of something, right, or maybe you have a CMDB system, right, you want that CMDB data to be pulled in day out or time to time as a part of analysis to make sure that your properties of your resources are fine. Another part is security, as you say, right, there are tools which is going to protect, detect, and respond and react all of your environment, which is fine. But you need to always have accessibility to the threat intel data. So what I mean by threat intel data is, let's say for example, you have virus total, for let's say for example you have any other abuse DB or something like that. Those things are public provided, maybe recorded future for that matter. You should be in need of like to integrate them to your SIEM tool, and there are automations, but they should be also accessible in terms of your security copilot experience, right? For example, when you type something in security copilot, you want to include maybe your threat intel data. It should be, yes, the vendor does some part of it, but not fully. There are a lot of ways which you can collaborate and improve. Let's say as a part of your incident analysis, right, your SOC team goes to your particular threat intel or your particular mesh setup where you want to kind of get certain details, right, things like that. Then there is a piece called customization and flexibility. So when I say customization, right, so if we take a step back and look at security copilot and talk about the use cases of security copilot, we all know that Microsoft has products which basically covers the security aspect of it. If you go for enterprise licenses, Sentinel, Defender, and things like that, they cover it. Now, once the alert is created based on the configured system, there are defined workflows, right? For example, you get a brute force alert, and as an analyst, what we are doing is we are doing step one, two, three, four, five. Let's say run a query, see the results, go to another user and go to query and things like that. Again, there might be different use case. Let's say if a malware alert comes in, right, we are supposed to see everybody else in the network or all other machines in the network, do they have the virus signature and things like that. So mostly majorly a lot of use cases have their own workflow, and they're definitely unique by the nature of the threat or the alert, or also depending on the environment, right? So what happens with this is, with the plugin idea, right, you can make entire workflow management as an orchestrator, in separation with your copilot, which can run in parallel and then give you a response. And we're going to see some of them in examples how that works, right? And also I'll try to show you, there are literally a GitHub repository where you can get started by using the community plugin or Microsoft plugin with the code itself. And it is really easy to write. It's depending on a couple of factors, right? Now fundamentally, after I do all this, there are certain possibilities, right, when you expect Copilot to do ease our entire workflow, right? Then it also expect us to enhance the detection and response. So that means, let's say your workflow says if an incident is raised, check the users, or let's take an example of impossible travel or typical sign in. So what you're going to do is, we take something like we know that once we get an alert of impossible travel or atypical sign in, as an analyst, we're going to grab that alert, pick up the user ID, pick up the IP address, go to the sign in logs, look at the last 60 days, look at how many countries those users has access and where all they have access from, are the IPs are a part of a network and things like that, and think so on and so on, right? So basically, this simple example of a troubleshooting as a times from a time standpoint, right? As an analyst, when you do that, it might take maybe 20-30 minutes to complete a full step. Now imagine a way that if we tell security copilot analyze this incident, and then that analyzes and the KQL query or the further steps what is actually carried out by analyst, they can be clubbed together or across multiple custom plugins wherein they are nothing but KQL queries and basic APIs, and then that can enrich your response. Now imagine, number one, you're going to reduce the number of or the volume of the incident or the total time which is required for analysts to assess that. Also make it as a faster and enhanced detection because you really have contextual awareness. Let's say what is there in sign in logs, what is there in Intune, what is there in Defender, for example, right? Sorry. So that's why this enhanced detection capabilities come into play, right? So, and just to give you a little bit of idea what type of custom plugins can be, I would say it can be based on an API, right? It can be based on GPT plugin because fundamentally it's also it works with a GPT model, and obviously when you talk about security and Sentinel and microsecurity, KQLS is one of the topics which often comes up. So KQL is really one of the options available, right? Now we will try to quickly look at the steps, how do we do it. And as I mentioned, this is just a placeholder for you to understand, and then we jump onto the portal. Build a plugin from list of supported plugins. That means, as I say, API, YAML, GPT and KQL, and then publish that YAML or upload that YAML as a plugin into security copilot, right? Now obviously the next step is demo. So with that said, let me try to quickly jump onto the page now. For those who are basically new to Copilot for security, the URL is like https securitycopilot.microsoft.com, and obviously to log into here you need a corporate login because definitely there has to be Azure Active Directory behind the scenes so that you can log in, right? And the screen looks like this. It has certain details, and then please share central entities from MITRE for last 30 days. So this is the plugin actually I have written for the demo. I'll see if we can run it and understand it. Right now, to understand where the idea of plugin comes from, what you're going to do is we're going to come down here and click on the small icon of sources, right? Not this one, the middle one, which is called sources, and click on them. And you can see there are already Microsoft defined plugin. I'm going to show more, right? uh, you can turn it on, turn it off, and all those things are also kind of authentication based. That means you can connect to them. For example, when you talk about Microsoft incident and workspaces, you can specify, if I, let's say, configure what is the default workspace name, subscription name, and resource group name, right? Similarly, it goes to other things, and it also can be configured in an Azure Active Directory authentication mechanism, right? Now let's say if we are doing a threat hunting, right, or if you want to do more analysis, we also going to look at non-Microsoft one, and you can see there are really a few, as I said, example, right? I've used DB, I've used IPDB, and if I go further, and the list is obviously growing day by day, right? You can set it up everything, and I'll also show you from where it comes in, and then where you can also contribute if you think that's a valid use case. So in this plugin, there are, like, for example, if you want to pull out something from ServiceNow, as I was giving the example of CMDB system or things like that, or a ticketing system or ITSM system. So I've used AB, or maybe you want to do something with a CrowdSec, maybe you want to do something with CyberArk, right? And that's what it's available as a part of plugins, right? And there is, as you see, the list is really, really huge. Now imagine that these are all good, but in your SOC environment or your security environment, you have certain use cases wherein that is the workflow is defined in a very unique way, that if alert A comes in, do ABCD step, right? And how do we do that? Now that's where we come into custom plugin. And you see I've done like two plugins, it's already uploaded. And I will click on this. If you really want to upload a plugin, all you're going to do is I'll also show you how a plugin looks like, but this is the place where you can upload a plugin. And when you upload a plugin, right, what basically going to happen is you can see that anyone in the organization or just me. So the ideal way to do it is just me, because we should always try and test before we deploy anything to production. And obviously this is given to your permissions, right? Now, there are two options as I mentioned earlier, right? Either it can be a YAML or JSON file, or it can be also act as a OpenAI plugin. Now, if I click on OpenAI plugin, you can give a link of a JSON file. Same thing goes here. Either you can link it in a public repo. Let's say you have put your JSON file in a GitHub repo, right? You can give that, or you can upload the JSON file, right? And that's it. And once you upload it, I'm going to cancel this and scroll to the bottom. This is how it's going to look like. Get GCP IP, and as you see, it's private, right? That means this is particularly available for this particular Copilot for security incidents. It's not available for everywhere. Now, how the plugin looks like, I can go to one of the GitHub repos I have, and then let me open this up so that basically you can see it. So this is a YAML file, as you can see, right? What it does, I have to give a name here. I'll give a description and a display name. So as you see, the display name Sentinel entities on MITRE. So if I go back here, and you see that's the display name, right? And skill summarizes from alerts from Sentinel workspace. So if I go back here, that's the description here. And in the skill group, right, what is the skill group? So there are, like as I mentioned, there are three formats: GPT, API, and KQL. So my format is KQL, and the rest of the schema will be compiled based on that format, whatever you give. Skill, I'm giving a skill name. The skill name is Sentinel entities on MITRE. And as I say, I want to check the MITRE entities, kind of how many entities are there and things like that. Now, one interesting fact, right? Whenever we are trying to write a plugin, and specifically for KQL, if you already conversed with KQL in the previous, one is that we can always write a very simple query, right? I'll come to the bottom quickly. This is my query, which is getting executed as a part of the plugin, but I don't want it to run like last 7 days always, or last 30 days always, or last 24 hours. I want it to be configurable. So for that, you can also define parameters, right? As you see, inputs from date, and I'm also going to show you how you can basically look at things from that perspective, and how we can pass the parameters. So from that and to that, and the settings is target is Sentinel, and tenant ID is what is the tenant ID we're in, subscription ID, resource group, and workspace detail. And it's going to take my Azure Active Directory or Entra ID authentication and try to query that, right? Coming to this is what the query looks like in the template section. And as you see, this is a YAML file, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I have uploaded that as a part of this security copilot instance, and this is where it is. And if I go to settings quickly here, right? If I go to edit file, it's not going to let me edit that. It will ask me upload a new file, because it's not that the editor is not available. It is just that you upload the new file here, which I'm not going to do that right now because it's already done. And that's what the configuration looks like. So in this case, what is done is during upload itself, right? We have configured all the parameters and uploaded it. Now, this is where the plugins comes into play, right? Now let me close that and see if I have any of the previous sessions. I will go to my sessions, and please, I'll try to open this, see if it works. All right. Hopefully it works, and it is loading. All right. There you go. So as you see here, right? What I am writing as a prompt here is please share the central entities on MITRE for last 30 days. So see, this Copilot instance is intelligent enough, and I'll just expand the step. Choose sentinel entities on MITRE. What it did, it basically, picked up that plugin, right? Processed a request. I'll expand this and also prepared a response. And then this is what it says, because if I look at my KQL, this is what the entities look like. Here are the entities created on the date range, on the specified time and date range. So this is what it looks like from a tactics perspective. What are the tactics? Like there are four initial access, who are the entities, there are IPs and things like that. So if I scroll a little bit down, it's going to give me a whole list of things out of that. Now, I can just rewrite that in a little different way, but still the plugin works in a better way. Please, same thing, just I have added in a tabular format. So now if I go back to my plugin here, I didn't define anywhere that it has to be tabular, it has to be like anything. So technically it is giving me a KQL query response, and that query response is basically passed from entity from this plugin engine to Copilot, and Copilot processes it depending on the prompt. So that means, coming back to the Copilot screen, whatever prompt we write, right, that's basically always broken, and parameters are identified and picked up, and it basically showed in a tabular format. And at the moment it show tabular format, it also gives you export to Excel. We didn't do any additional configuration for that, right? Now let me get to the next one. You can also rewrite that in a different way. So I'm saying that give it since 1st April. So I have possibly ran this session on April 15th, and when I have done it, it's on like 1st of 15th. So last 15 date, it has given me the count, right? So that kind of thing you can actually try to do that as a plugin, as a very small example. Now, going further, I will quickly jump onto the documentation and show you, let's say, if I want to go for an API plugin, right? What an API plugin looks like. It has all the similar steps, but here the specification will be different, as you see. So in format, instead of KQL, this is API now, and the specification is template YAML. Obviously, the YAML is same thing, and just below it, you have the YAML specification. That means you can literally have an API or YAML specified, which will act as an API, and that can give response. And the way you can do it is like you can configure it to be key-based authentication. If there is an application, you can do a delegated one. You can do it based on enter ID and things like that. Now, then coming back to the authentication type, yes, there are different type of authentication also you can configure, as you can see, starting from Azure Active Directory, to Azure Active Directory delegated, basic API key, anything for that matter. Now, if we also look into the GPT section of it, I will quickly scroll, and right now there's only one model as for Microsoft defined, and you can see the format is GPT here, and here you can see some examples and things like that, and what are the URL text. So basically this is the schema for GPT plugin too. So fundamentally you can write three kind of plugins for Copilot for security, and the use cases can be like, all right, I want to minimize my SOC workflow, right? That right now, as an analyst, ABCD five steps are basically carried out: running a KQL query, running a virus total check. So everything can be combined into multiple plugins, or can be, written into a single plugin itself. But the ideal way is to do it separate plugin, and then idea here is to build your prompt in such a way that that can call the plugin. And again, this is natural language based. There's nothing that you need to write exact phase or key. So maybe, as I mentioned, right, please share entities, central entities in MITRE for last 30 days. That is giving me this kind of response. So that's what is all about, building your own plugins with Copilot. And quick things over here, I will again go back to settings, not settings here, upload screen here. click on the section here on the sources, and as you see in the left hand side, by default plugins are enabled. And I would say I'd also like to show what are the plugins available, right? So these are the plugins as I've showed earlier. Now let's try to look at some of the more examples here. So I'd say this is again, this URL here is defined by Microsoft, and it's a GitHub repo where technically there is a huge set of plugins available which you want to plug and play. So as you see, three sections here. I'd say published plugin, and you can see there are very much good plugins. So let's say if I say CrowdSec TI, right? And I would say go to the manifest example. So what it does, it is, we need to see description, we need to see authorization and supported types. And in the skill group, if you see, this is a classic example of API placed plugin. And if I come down, what it does, it's gonna give me a specification URL. So I'll try to copy this and go to the new tab and paste it what it looks like. It downloaded, and let me try to open it. Right, so what are the parameters coming to this? The IP address and the response and how it looks like. So it's basically a, as you can see, this is a YAML file, and this is a input output response is like, even with the error code, right? That how the API should be there. So these are the required inputs, whatever is needed. And then this is what the API key is also needed. And then if you look at what are the properties available, IP range and things like that. So this is the entire specification. As you see, this is going to be a little bigger, so I'll let you definitely read it through it, because this has the entire API definition written inside this YAML file itself, right? So that's again a good example of a YAML file based on API. Now if I go back to the screen and go back to something, instead of published plugins, I will go to community based plugins here. Let's try to open up here. I'll go to one simpler one wherein not go to, there is something on cost. Okay, so all right, so I'd go here, geolocation. So let's take IP geolocation as an example, right? So what it is trying to do, it's maybe a simpler one. If I go to here, it is again getting to do some other uh, OpenAI, and then it's referring to the other YAML. And as you can see, this is built based on API key, and the format is API. Now if I go back, the OpenAI specification file is also here, which I'm going to open. And as you can see, this is what it does. So it is trying to call, this is again a much more simpler than the one what I have seen in the last time. So this is trying to take calling this API, and then paths are IPGO, and then the parameter is this one, right? And it's a get call. So if we try to get this, obviously it needs the API key, right? And if I hit the URL, that's not going to give me anything, because it needs a key. So again, what it does, it basically specify a OpenAI kind of a YAML behind the scene, which has all the specification if we are talking about calling an API here, right? Now to look into something as a mid complex one, I'd say go to custom scenarios and daily operations, table ingestion, central cost query plugin, right? So if I look at this plugin, right, this is another example of KQL plugin. So as you see here, right, that It is similar to the plugin what I've just showed earlier. It has tenant ID, subscription ID, and then this is also doing a KQL query behind the scene, which is nothing but running a query from your Copilot screen and going to give you a billable data difference for the custom tables alone, right? That's what it is going to do. So to summarize this, right, the plugin idea is not only that it always need not to be generic. It can be very unique to your own environment because that's where the plugin are meant. And you can find the common plugins in this GitHub repo or within the Copilot instance itself. As you can see, there are a lot of plugins available from Azure standpoint or from a non-Microsoft standpoint as well. But mostly if you have a defined workflow which you want to optimize, or you want to call them like a micro functions, right, or do some sort of function chaining, that's where you start using plugins. So for example, if you have a very big use case where it said okay, once an alert comes, right, I need to go to XYZ system, scan through that, is the user is good, if the user is is not in the watch list, or maybe go to that IP address, that IP address has a good reputation score and things like that. Everything can be wrapped out obviously in a single plugin if you have a custom requirement, and all the backends are obviously in custom, right? We can do that, and that's what the purpose of custom plugin here. So coming back to the very straight workflow, uh, number one, to to get to plugin, right, you should have a Microsoft Sentinel instance or Microsoft security landscape. That might be Defender, Sentinel, or both together provision. Then you go to Azure, you provision one of the Copilot capacity. And once you provision all the Copilot capacity, you're going to come to this security copilot.microsoft.com, and that's where you can see your Copilot is running. And from there on, you can actually start writing your own plugins. Now, to test a plugin, as I mentioned, let me try to do that. The first thing to test it, so I will try to get this one copy file, or maybe let me see if I can download this file, right? So I have downloaded this file. I will try to open this. Let me try to upload this in the plugin once again, see if it allows. So I will come down and come to the bottom here, and again add one, and I'm going for only me, and I'm gonna drag and drop from my other screen to this. It uploaded, right? And let's add it. Plugin not added because it did not find the expected key. You know why exactly this happened? Because I'll again open up the one. So there are parameters which is not fit in here. That's the reason, it is not letting me upload. So once I fill it up, it's gonna let me upload, and that's where, let me go back here. That's where I have done the previous one, right? So that's how you can have your own plugin created and start using Copilot for having a better efficiency or better management of your workflows, or I would say your SOC workflows. So I'd again like to summarize in a moment, but before that, feel free to have any questions if you have. All right. So as I do not see any questions, I would like to continue here. Now, let's try to imagine a case wherein you have a plugin or you do not have a plugin. What is the difference it's going to make, right? Because that's an important point for us to go ahead and spend our time to develop a plugin and then use it. Is it good? Is it bad? So number one, right? Uh, Plugin cannot happen on an out of the box environment. This has to happen on an environment where you already have your security operations running in, and you have pretty much predefined workflows on paper or on process being followed. And the challenge is that it's going to take up some time, right? For example, every analyst spend 30 minutes on each incident, and you know that if you can build a plugin on one of those, you're going to cut down that time by 50%. So that's one of the scenarios wherein you can use plugin and you can develop your own plugin and so on and so forth. And even for inspiration purpose, you can always use this repository and look at the plugins, and this can be a good starting point for all of you to get started with writing your own plugin, right? And this doesn't require a very special tool. It's just a YAML file and it's or a JSON file. Now, the next part is how do you measure basically your plugin is performing good, bad, and things like that. Now, for that point, what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned, I'll go to my sessions and click on the latest session here, which I ran it for the plugin. Now, when we write a plugin, obviously, as I mentioned, when you upload a plugin, ideally it should be always just for me so that you can test it, keep on testing it till the time you feel a good maturity of the plugin, or you think that okay, SOC analyst, whatever terminologies you are trying to give, it is able to capture. And one of the good ways to do it is, let's say you have a SOC workflow, and then you talk to the analyst team and then understand what are the terminologies they do, or what are the terminologies they talk about when they do a troubleshooting. Let's say we talk about a brute force attack, or we talk about atypical sign in, right? The standard response can be like, okay, if it is a brute force, pick up the IP address, pick up the username. For username, go to sign in logs, look at all the historical logs for the IP address, go to any provider, look at the threat check or the threat score of the IP or things like that. Now we can pick up those terminologies and start writing our own plugin name accordingly, and also the display name and the description. So that's how it will be more relatable when we create a plugin and start writing a prompt, because prompt will not do a like to like search for your plugin name. It will somehow understand if there are nearing words. So that's where you need to play around a little bit or test a little bit here, so that you can technically find the right prompt. And once you are done with testing, you're going to tell the security team that okay, I have created a plugin, I have enabled it for everyone, and make sure that you use these kind of prompts, right? For example, for this, if I need to build a prompt, what I would say is share sentinel entities on MITRE for, then I'll put a placeholder for time. Or I would say I give the next prompt as share sentinel entities on MITRE for last 30 days in a tabular format. That can be another prompt. Third one can be share your sentinel entities on MITRE for since April 1st. Or can be, there's another prompt can be like share sentinel entities on MITRE for month this, date this, to month this, date this, right? So that it can parameterize and pick up the prompt accordingly. And that's where you're gonna see the results coming more and more optimized, right? So that's how you should start using the plugins and building the plugins to make sure that you can get the best use of it. And obviously, once you're done with that, there would be fine tuning in the queries, there'll be fine tuning in the definitions and things like that. Now, one good part of this is, for example, you can still keep, let's say you're doing a version upgrade or you want to update something, right? All you need to do is, as I've shown you, right, you have an updated file, you go here, you come to the bottom and update the plugin. And if you go to Copilot for security plugin, you just upload the new version of the plugin, and that's going to work. Just making sure that you have compiled, tested it right way, and then put the right parameters in. So you don't need to have, like, you don't need to publish it to everyone. It's just that once you publish, make it anyone in an organization, and it's going to be available for everyone, right? So that's something you can do. Now, maybe there is certain things you see that you have written a plugin and that started giving such a result which is not expected. maybe that is causing hamper in the workflow, causing confusions. How we put a rollback, right? So from a rollback standpoint, all you need to do is go ahead and then disable the plugin. And then the moment you disable it here, depending on, obviously, if you have done it for all org or yourself, it's gone not going to show up. So after disable the plugin, right, even if you write one prompt related to the plugin, that's not going to give you any results. So there is no chance of your plugin being misused, or there is an error in plugin. There are reports coming in that, okay, this is not giving the right expected result and things like that. So number one, to upload a plugin, you just come here and upload the YAML file or the JSON file, and then initially you do it just for me, and then you do it for everyone. And while you do just for me, you need to specify or learn the prompts with which it works better and share it to the team so that everybody can utilize it before you make it anyone in an organization. Now next thing is, anytime you want to disable things like that, or maybe anytime you want to disable certain things, you just disable this by the toggle of this button, and the plugin is kind of available but disabled from there. Now there's also certain other settings. If I go ahead, right, this is not available in the example plugins, but you can always do that. If I click on settings for this, right, you can configure certain things to be set up, like during configuration. That also, let's say you are configuring it, let's say like you have been working, and there are like two teams working on things like that, and then you want, depending on the team member, things has to be configured differently. So what can be done, you go ahead and share the plugin so that they can apply it just for them. And in the configuration, obviously, they can configure in a way that it only connects for them, and then it works seamlessly with the right connected points, right? So that's I would say that should be the basic flow of Copilot plugins on Copilot for security. And again, I will give it back to you for any questions you have. And in the meantime, let me also run you through a couple of other examples over here. All right. So jumping back to the definition here, right? If you want to see what exactly each login looks like, let's say if I want to go to dark trace, right? So I'm going to click on the dark trace, and it's going to talk about settings and configuration and things like that, right? And also I'll go to the GitHub, and then let's say if I go to GPT plugins, which you have not seen any examples of. So these are different examples of GPT plugin as well, right? Now let's go back to the other plugins too, and I'd say published plugins, wherein I'd say, let's say, Gray Noise Enterprise. Oh, yeah. So it's obviously, and as I mentioned, this is API based. So if I come down, it has a OpenAI specification URL. So I'll go back and go back to here, go back to this, not YAML again, go back to OpenAI YAML. As you can see, this is the specification available for that particular plugin if it is an API based one. For example, what are the parts? It's on v2, it's a noise and context, and then this signifies this is the parameter, and then it's a get command, and what are the details. Again, there's another get command with quick. So one is context, one is quick. Obviously this is readable, that context meaning it can be something very I would say bigger or detailed oriented, right? And as you see, these are examples also written there how you can call those methods within the plugin. So that means it's not only always a plugin which you can call. You can, if you write a prompt right away, or if you design the prompt right away, you can also call specific methods within the plugin as well. So in this case, tell me about the IP address from Greenhouse database. And in this, the next one, it says quick, right? It is, again, it is going to say all the major difference here is use to do a quick check, right? This quick check automatically connects to the quick, and then it gives you a quick result, right? So that's what basically is. And then obviously you can go multi ones, or which is like for multiple IP addresses, which is kind of given again. And these are responses. And if you want to do whitelisted IPs and things like that, that's where you get to define your OpenAI specification, right? So I think with that said, I would like to conclude the demo here, all right? And a quick recap on the section of the Copilot piece, that why we do things what we do. So again, a recap here why we need plugins, as you have seen an example, right? If you want to connect with Darktrace, if you want to connect with ServiceNow, if you want to connect with Splunk, let's say. So integrating with other services, that's one of the major needs. And you would find plugins which are available, which are generic, like let's say Darktrace or Splunk, which are maybe generic to connect to Prompt Sentinel. Then there might be certain things which is very unique to your environment. Let's say you want to go to a particular database, which is internal thread database, or internal checks database and things like that. That's very specific to your particular environment, right? That's where exact fit in for custom plugin. Access to that intel, obviously, if you virus total, abuse tb, or gray noise and things like that. Now, customization and flexibility, all right? So what customization I can do, there are a couple of ways, right? Number one, you write it in a way that it basically works for your workflows, right? And also you do it just for me, and then you configure it to target to specific workspaces, let's say if it is Sentinel and things like that. And by doing all these things, you are enhancing the detection and response. That means, as an analyst, without a plugin, I need to do like 5 steps. And this is basically optimizing the way, as an analyst, I interact by just giving one query response whenever we write to, write a prompt in the right way. And again, there are 3 ways, 3 skills we can utilize as of today. One is GPT, one is API, and one is KQL. So GPT is a model based one. KQL is like where you can write your KQL queries and connect to a central instance, and then talk back and forth, just as you have seen, getting the entities plugin or getting the cost plugin, things like that. APIs, yes, if you want to, particularly as you've seen, like in the recent example I've seen, for a contextual report for an IP address, there can be an API. Within the same plugin, there can be one API that can have another API for a quick scan and things like that. So these are the 3 things. And how do we do that? Just build a plugin from the list of supported plugins that is like out of all 3, which is API, GPT, and KQL. And obviously, as of today, you get to upload both YAML and JSON file. So use any of them. Now, depending on what kind of plugins you are using, for example, if you're using a KQL one, right? So that KQL and can be a single file itself, wherein you just write everything within the same YAML file as well as a query. You can either host it in a public location and then refer the link, or upload the file directly to your Copilot instance. And whenever you are writing a GPT based one or API based one, you have to define the main JSON file where the exact file is, and within that you're going to link to another OpenAI specification file which has the entire specification of the API. And then publishing is nothing but making it for everyone or making it for you alone, right? So that's all about, I would say, how do you develop plugin and start writing your own plugin and make the best out of Copilot for security here, right? So with that, I would like to conclude the session today. And as I say, I've shared my LinkedIn profile. Once again, anytime if you have any questions around Copilot for security, happy to chat about it anytime.
Final call for everyone to ask the questions. If you have any questions, please drop those questions in a chat section and we'll pick it up from there. Meanwhile, I have shared the link which can take your learning further. So please do visit the page, take your learning further. And if you all have any more questions regarding, please reach out Samik on LinkedIn. Please scan the QR code for the LinkedIn. Okay, so I think we don't have any questions. Let's call for a wrap. Thank you, Samik. Thank you so much for your time and for a wonderful session.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.